Grim Sleeper. Grim Sleeper. Grim Sleeper. That's it. Those are the magic words. You said my name 3 times, and you all know what that means. Nothing. Nothing at all. I'm not a ghost, you know. That stuff only works in the movies. Speaking of movies, welcome to night 13 of 31 Nights, 31 Frights, our month-long review marathon of horror movies. Our quick, mostly spoiler-free looks at these films should help you decide if they're a worthy addition to your own Halloween viewing lineup. So let's kick things off tonight with the lowdown on Beetlejuice. Beetlejuice was released in 1988. It's rated PG. Runtime is about an hour, 32 minutes. Was directed by Tim Burton with multiple writers. We had Michael McDowell, who has a story and screenplay credit, Larry Wilson, who has a story credit, and Warren Scarron, who has a screenplay credit. The cast is comprised of Alec Baldwin and Gina Davis as Adam and Barbara Maitland. Winona Ryder is Lydia Dietz. Catherine O'Hara is Delia Dietz. And Jeff Jones is her husband Charles. And of course, the ghost with the most, Michael Keaton, portrays Beetlejuice.
I myself am strange and unusual.
Beetlejuice tells the story of 2 families, the Maitlands and the Dietzes. The Maitlands are a young New England couple who love their country home and the solitude of country living. They've opted to take a vacation at home to get some work done around the house, despite the pestering from Jane, their realtor and sister, who coldly reminds Barbara that their big house should be in the hands of a family, not so subtly implying that Barbara is unable to get pregnant. On a trip to their hardware store, the Maitlands perish in an unfortunate car accident and return to the house as spirits. They quickly find Jane has sold the house to a pair of New York yuppies, Charles and Delia Dietz, and their daughter Lydia. Frustrated with Delia's strange sense of design and her desire to wreck the home and remake it in her image, the Maitlands try to scare them away. Unfortunately, the Dietzes are unable to see them, so it does precious little good, at least until Lydia, who has read their handbook for the recently deceased, finds them walking around in sheets. The young girl actually ends up befriending the couple. The Maitlands seek help from Juno, part of the bureaucratic government of the afterlife, to try and get rid of the Dietzes. Discouraged with Juno's lack of interest in helping them, the couple then turns to the self-proclaimed bioexorcist Beetlejuice. Following instructions on a television commercial, they chant his name 3 times and end up teleported into their own town model, where Beetlejuice is buried for some reason. Upon releasing him, they find he is far too aggressive and disgusting for their taste and escape the model without hiring him. But now that he's out, Beetlejuice intends to prove to the Maitlands that he is their best shot at getting rid of the living.
Possession! Good. Learn to throw your voice, fool your friends, fun and party.
This film was one of Tim Burton's first, and serves almost as an archetype for so many of his movies that followed. We see here the germs of what will someday come about as far as casting, with Michael Keaton and Winona Ryder in particular. His musical collaboration with Danny Elfman. This is a Tim Burton film before the time when there were Tim Burton films, and so many of his staples are introduced here. Now, I first saw Beetlejuice as a kid of about 9 or 10 years old, and I found it absolutely enthralling. I loved the character of Beetlejuice, and I found myself frustrated that he was in the film so little, especially since it was named after him. A lot of the more adult humor went well over my head as a kid, but I definitely picked up on it this time around. So watching the film as an adult, I find it just as entertaining. However, the many flaws and inconsistencies become a little harder to ignore. They don't necessarily rob the film of its enjoyment factor, but I did do a few double takes upon watching this again. So let's dispense with those oddities and inconsistencies first. From the get-go, the film really doesn't follow its own rules regarding Beetlejuice. Now, ostensibly, saying his name 3 times can bring him back, but it's never established where they're bringing him back from. Is the implication that he's been buried in their model cemetery since his fall from grace? Because I don't think that's been there for the length of time they imply Beetlejuice has been locked away. Is he completely bound up and unable to get out? If that's the case, how did he create a television commercial to convince the Maitlands to say his name? The first time his name is said 3 times, it puts the Maitlands into their model. Later, when Lydia says it at the end of the film, it allows him to get out of the model completely. So are there different levels of lockdown for him? If Beetlejuice himself is under some kind of spell, why does Barbara saying home 3 times get the Maitlands out of the model and back into their attic? If they had said his name again 3 times at that point, would he have been bound back up? Or would he have been freed completely from the model, like he is later when Lydia says it? If his name is said 3 times when he's out of the model, where would he go? Juno criticizes the Maitlands because, according to her, it doesn't do any good to tear your faces off in front of someone who can't see you. Yet later, during their second meeting with her, she demands to see what they're going to do to scare the Dietzes. And that's the scene where they stretch out their faces into ridiculous shapes and giant mouths with eyeballs on their tongue and all that fun stuff. Now, by Juno's earlier logic, the Dietzes still aren't going to be able to see that. So wouldn't the same logic follow? It doesn't do any good to stretch your faces out into ridiculous shapes in front of people who can't see you. What's different? There's also some waiting room strangeness when Beetlejuice ends up back in the afterlife waiting room, and some of the characters from earlier are still there. But clearly the numbers have cycled through completely. So why are there still people waiting there? Now, to the film's credit, the afterlife drives home some excellent little story points. Otho, at one point, tells the Dietzes and their dinner guests that people who commit suicide are doomed to become civil servants in the afterlife. When we're in the waiting room with the Maitlands, we see the woman working behind the counter has slit her wrists, and now she's working as a civil servant. In the office area, we also see a man who has hanged himself passing paperwork along. But it's a nice and subtle touch, and it shows that Burton does have an eye for detail, which is why some of these other things are a little odd that they slipped past him somehow. So the cast is stellar. Everyone fits well in their roles, and the dynamic between the different characters are all great. You feel empathy for the Maitlands at losing their lives in their home. Delia will make your skin crawl at times. Charles will definitely make you roll your eyes a little bit. Michael Keaton as Beetlejuice steals pretty much every scene he's in.
Are you a ghost too?
I'm the ghost with the most, babe.
Time for the verdict. So, is it worth the watch? Definitely. While the rules around Beetlejuice are never really explained, and the afterlife seems kind of fuzzy and inconsistent at best, these issues are easily overlooked because the cast and direction is so incredibly well done. Even the music is extraordinary. From Elfman's macabre, sometimes silly, sometimes scary orchestrations, to Harry Belafonte's calypso-driven tracks, you won't soon forget the soundtrack for this film. In my estimation, Beetlejuice gets 3.5 Grimms. That's it for this episode of 31 Nights, 31 Frights. Thanks for listening. Please check back in tomorrow for another quick look at some spooky cinema. And please feel free to browse around Grimm's Scary Tales and take a look at the other shows and videos that we have to offer.